Okay, what up ladies and gents? Are we live? Today was a bit of a rough day for me because unfortunately this is the second time I'm recording this video because the first time the audio got corrupted. So this is actually the second time I'm recording this video. I am here, okay, hopefully as your favorite Asian robot and favorite Darktide YouTuber, to talk about the Assail Psyker build that you guys would have seen me using on stream. This is the Assail Psyker build after patch 14, after the patch 14 changes. I'm gonna go through with it and I'm gonna show you how to build it, what variations you can have, and all that kind of stuff. This video format is gonna be a little bit longer and, well, actually it's gonna be quite a bit longer and also a bit different to the previous format where we went through gear first, because guess what? This build is designed to work with any staff, anytime, anywhere. Okay? Well, other than the Purg staff, it's not really suited for the Purg staff, but it works with the Trauma, Surge, and the Voidstrike. Okay? Alright. Let's get into it right now. I've got my holy music in the background because people apparently like that in one of my previous build videos, so I hope you enjoy this. Let's do this. Ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, talent tree, and camera vanish. Okay, so for this particular build, I'm going to go through segment by segment and explain to you all the variations that can occur. For the first segment, for the first part of the talent tree, in fact, you know what, let's reset it all. For the first part of the talent tree, you will generally want two means of regenerating your toughness, so I usually go Quietude, Warp Expenditure. Quietude allows you to replenish 5% toughness for every 10% peril quelled, and Warp Expenditure is 2.5% toughness for every 10% peril generated. Okay, this turns me into a toughness regenerating machine, and I like it a lot. Battle Meditation is used to get these two nodes, okay, but I also find that it's very useful because sometimes it can save you from going over the limit. Okay, next, Perfect Timing, plus 3% warp damage for 10 seconds on a critical hit. Works with any critical hit and will boost your assail, your staff. It's just really good. All right, it won't boost your sword damage, but hey, you know, you've got other things to boost that. So I go for that. Perilous Combustion is you can decide to have it if you want, but if you find no value in it or a low value in it, then, you know, you don't have to have Perilous Combustion, okay? I leave it as an option, because quite often there aren't really that many other options that I personally want. Okay, so Perilous Combustion can be useful, but you know, you don't have to have it. I find that in mixed hordes with a lot of specialists, this can help a lot. It helps a lot more than you might think with weakening enemies. All right, so let's go with Perilous Combustion. Now, what are the variations that you can make here? Well, if you'd like to, you can go for Soul Stealer and Metal in place of Quietude and Warp Expenditure. It's really your choice if you want to do things like that, but then you will not be able to get Battle Meditation. So your build will look something like this instead. You'll still be able to pick up Assail, and it's roughly going to cost you the same amount of points, but you know, you're just going to have to make a choice. Do you want Battle Meditation or not? And if you go with this style of building, whereby Soul Stealer regenerates 7.5% toughness on Warp Attack Kill, and Metal replenishes 5% toughness on crits. These are great, but some situations you may not be able to kill, especially in Damnation. So I find that Quietude and Warp Expenditure tend to work better for me, along with Battle Meditation. Alright, this gives you this particular setup, and then I pick up Assail, Ethereal Shards, and Quick Shards. More Piercing is very good, and Quick Shards allows you to regenerate your Assail faster, which is very, very useful in Auric Damnation runs, especially high intensity Shock Trooper runs. After that, you grab your toughness damage reduction, and that is it for the first part of the talent tree. For the second part of the talent tree, there aren't really many variations here, but I'm still going to show them to you anyway. You can go for, normally what I would do is go Mind in Motion, and then now you've got a choice. You can go for Inspiring Presence, unlocking either Kinetic Presence or Seer's Presence, or you can go for the toughness damage reduction and go for Prescience. I know I'm pronouncing that wrong, but it doesn't really matter. Prescience allows you to take Empathetic Evasion and Anticipation. Both of these are excellent choices because your critical hits will make you count as dodging against range attacks for 1 second, and you've got 50% more dodge duration, which can make you feel like you're Neo in the Matrix dodging bullets. You also get 1 additional dodge. So let's say your weapon has 5 dodges normally for your melee weapon, you've now got 6 with an extra dodge duration. It can feel pretty good doing things in this style, but what I will say is that what has worked for me is actually one with the warp. So I make the sacrifice here, and get Inspiring Presence, which helps myself and all my allies in Coherency replenish toughness faster. I go for Kinetic Presence for that extra 5% against elite and specialist enemies. Then I go, and it boosts the whole team, by the way, which is really good. And then I go for one with the Warp and Peril Resistance, okay? Then I go for Venting Shriek. Venting Shriek is used because it is a 1-point wonder, all right? And one with the Warp is used because the more peril you have, the more you have toughness damage reduction, which is absolutely insane. Like, there is no reason not to have one with the Warp in a vast majority of situations, because it will save you. It will save you in so many bad situations. It is just good to have, all right? With it, I found, like, of course, Empathetic Evasion and Anticipation are awesome, but I found I got a lot more value out of one with the Warp. So that's just my personal preference, and I like it a lot. Plus, you can go for Venting Shriek, which can save you in case you are about to blow up, okay? Now, I grab my Peril Resistance down here, and this is it for the second part of the talent tree, okay? If you're following so far, we're gonna get into the third part of the talent tree. Most of this is self-explanatory, but I hope I've explained all the choices as well. Okay, third part of the talent tree is very straightforward, and does not have variations, but you're gonna need to understand why we make the choices we do. Puppet Master is a must-have, which boosts your Coherency aura. That being said, Coherency aura also boosts Inspiring Presence, as well as your Kinetic Presence, so it will reach allies that are 50% further away. Very useful, but also mandatory for this build, so it's not that you can't take it, right? Toughness damage reduction, once again, very good, because this will keep you alive. Now you've got Solidity, all right, which will increase your quell speed by 30%. Solidity is so potently powerful because no matter whether you're using your staff, your assail, or whatever, your quell speed is increased by 30%. Of course, your staff will be even faster because it's got a quell speed modifier. Yes, you use it as your dump stat anyway, but still, it's still gonna quell faster than 0, right? So add all of this together with Solidity. That's how I'm quelling so fast. Some people have asked me, how do you quell so fast in combat and things like that? Solidity is the key. A lot of builds require Solidity because of how strong it is as a talent. Without this to quell faster, you're not gonna have a great time, okay? Grab your toughness boost and then your keystone. Warp Siphon is crucial for this build. Why? Every time you kill an elite or specialist enemy, you build a warp charge. This warp charge will help you cool down your combat ability faster, but that's not why we use it. We grab these warp charges so that the next ability, Inner Tranquility, minus 6% peril generation for each additional warp charge. If you've got 6 warp charges, that's 36 less peril generation. 5% here and 5% here. Guess what? That's 46% peril regeneration that you have. All right? Surely you can understand that that's pretty darn good. You basically cast for about half the peril cost. I love that. Okay, Empyrean Empowerment is next, which will give you more base damage for every warp charge. If you've got 6 warp charges, that is 24% extra base damage. That's almost the same as a perk applying to everything. Okay, I don't see how you can resist this. And anyway, it's mandatory to go on to the next part of the tree. Psychic Vampire will allow that whenever you or an ally in Coherency kills an enemy, and your Coherency is larger, right? You've got a 4% chance to gain a warp charge. This will in turn allow you to keep your warp charges up even if you don't get the elite or specialist kill. Okay, so this is very important. Whoops, had a little burp there, excuse me, sorry. Anyway, this is basically what I do. And then I've got Warp Battery here to bring it up to 6 total warp charges, which basically makes the build go crazy. You've got 3 points left. I spend it on Health Boost, this is mandatory, and Warp Rider, also mandatory. Why? Warp Rider is a insane passive that allows you to get 20% more damage from all sources based on your current peril. On average, you are always going to have 10% more damage. And I cannot express how insanely awesome that is. It really helps you kill a lot faster in the field. Last but not least, you can go for Critical Chance Boost, which I find useful for certain staffs, or staves, however you want to pronounce it. We all know my pronunciation is weird, but it doesn't matter. Or you can go for Toughness Boost. It's really up to you what you want to do and how you want to play it. I tend to go with the Critical Chance Boost, but, like I said, you've got some choices, all right? Now, I'm going to show you one quick variation of this build that you can use if you find that you lack Horde Clear. take off warp battery and remove perilous combustion, and you can put the points into becalming eruption and creeping flames. What this will do is whenever you use your venting shriek, you will also apply 1 to 6 stacks of soul blaze based on your current peril. Use it when your peril is at 100%. Well, actually above 90 is good enough, but 100%, you know, when you're about to explode, use it. Not only will you build up peril slower on the next round, but you also burn out the horde. So you can use your creeping flames pretty offensively, and this is something that works well with the trauma staff. In fact, I prefer this kind of loadout for the trauma staff because it just allows me to deal with hordes a lot faster than just relying on Assail. And unlike the surge staff, the trauma staff does have a few more problems with the hordes than you might think, but I mean, I really leave the choice up to you. If you feel that this is not for you, totally okay. Go for warp battery and go for your perilous combustion, and you still more or less deal with everything that's in your way. All right, so you don't have to fear on that. Okay, so this is it for the talent build. Now let's talk gear. I'm sure you guys have been aching to see the kind of gear that I've been using on my streams, on my runs with this. I'm gonna go through all of it, so let's talk about it. Okay, first and foremost, we should start with our melee weapon. Now, your melee weapon is called the Macabian Mark IV Dueling Sword. Why is this sword so good? Well, let me just quickly give you a rundown of what's necessary on the stats, and then I'll show you why it's so good. In terms of stats, you want what is mandatory for your perks is 25% maniac damage. The other one can be anything you like, but I happen to roll specialists, so I went with that. For your blessings, the only one that is mandatory is Uncanny Strike. Why? 24% rending means 24% extra armor penetration on enemy weak spot hit for 3.5 seconds. This will just boost your damage, as you guys know. Alright, and it's a buff that stacks 5 times for you. It's so good. It is so good at helping me clean up hordes. Okay, so no regrets on Uncanny Strike. The other one, I just happened to roll Shred, but it works beautifully enough for me. Okay, stats wise, you want to have damage as high as possible, finesse and penetration as high as possible. Penetration helps you against armor, which is very crucial for the sword because you are kind of going to want to stab crushers, maulers, things like that may come up close to you. Alright, in a panic situation where you cannot kill them with other tools, this sword is your best friend. Also, great against muties, but this penetration stat does not affect your mutants, right? That's why you've got these perks here. Finesse affects your weak spot damage and critical damage. Get it as high as possible. 75 is the minimum, alright? It also affects your attack speed, so that's why 75 for me is the minimum. Damage, you will want to have it as high as possible, as close to 80, because this improves your base damage. There's no reason not to have this, okay? Cleave damage and mobility are less important, but cleave damage, you want it above 60 at least, alright? And mobility, the minimum is 65. Ideally, you want it at 75 or more. Okay, why? Mobility affects your dodge distance, which is really, really crucial to you. It affects your speed, and all of that is very important because the dueling sword is one of the fastest swords that you can run around with. Alright, your slide is faster, your dodge is longer, it just feels good in the field, alright? So that's what's so good about it. What else is good about the dueling sword? Well, if you find a mutie and you happen to hit his head, even without... Okay, well, sorry, that guy was already a bit weakened. But if you happen to stab him enough... Sorry, I really wanted to hit his head with that one. Stop turning around. There we go. You can almost one-shot a mutie. If you've got 4 warp charges, so you've got maxed out warp charges, you can actually one-shot a mutie with a stab to the head, which is very useful when they're charging at you. You can also two-shot them sometimes with a good stab to the back or stuff like that. So don't hesitate to use this against the muties. It's very, very good. Next, you can also stab out crushers, maulers, all this kind of stuff with your warp charges and a quick use of the special as well. Alright, you can really, really kill a lot of targets in melee that, you know, you might not recognize that you can kill. Even Reapers, although this is it's a bit weird to fight them. But remember that your heavy stab does a lot of damage to them. Okay? Now, the other thing that you want to know about the dueling sword is that against hordes, okay, you just want to try and keep going for the head. Once your uncanny strikes are maxed out, you will usually have a fairly easy time chopping through hordes because your attack is so fast. Alright? You don't really want to, even against hordes, you don't really want to use the special. Alright, it's generally not considered worth it. You can if you really want to. The special is mostly used together with the stabs to finish off targets that you may not kill instantaneously. Alright? So, The dueling sword in the field will generally be used like this, alright? For the quick stabs, especially if you can hit the head. Okay, something like that. The dueling sword is fast and very, very powerful, so it is one of the favorite weapons right now, and it more or less replaces the force sword because the force sword, although it is good, has a lot less dodging distance. Alright, so the force sword is like heavier in that sense, whereas the dueling sword is light and powerful. Okay, now let's talk about your ranged weapon choices. This is where we're going to take the most time because there are multiple choices available to you. With this build, you can use the Surge, the Trauma, or the Voidstrike staff with equal efficiency, alright? I leave the choices up to you, but here are my recommendations. The Surge is my all-time favorite. What perks are mandatory? Critical strike chance is mandatory on the Surge staff. The other perk can be whatever you roll. I happen to roll 25% flak armor. I'm happy with that. Blessings, unfortunately, both are mandatory. Warp Flurry and Warp Nexus are the only two blessings you must roll on your Surge staff. Without these two blessings, it will not be efficient. Alright? Warp Nexus allows you to have more critical chance based on the level of peril, and Warp Flurry lol, Asian pronunciation, allows you to charge your staff faster. Many people have asked me, dude, your staff charges in less than a second. Why do you need to charge it faster? Because going from slightly under a second to like maybe 0.7-ish, you will feel the difference in the field. Because sometimes you have to spam your Surge staff, and if in a short time of, say, half a second, you can get about 3/4 of your charge done, your Surge is going to do a lot more damage. This is why Warp Flurry is so important, okay? So don't hesitate on this. Now, in terms of stats, what you want is damage as high as possible, critical bonus as high as possible. Critical bonus affects your critical damage, versus all armor types, which is really good. And also, for some weird reason, it says primary action melee critical chance and secondary action melee critical chance. I don't know why melee is in there, because I'm pretty sure it affects your range, not your melee, but you know what, it is what it is. I'm not going to question it. Just know, critical bonus, very important. Damage, very important. And charge rate, very important, okay? You must have the highest possible charge rate, otherwise this thing will charge very slowly, and you need speed with the Surge staff. That being said, your warp resistance is also not a dumb stat anymore. Warp resistance is one of the stats that you must have as high as possible, especially with the Surge staff. You are going to need a minimum of 70, ideally you want 80. Why? This will help you build up a lot less peril when you're firing this, allowing you to spam your Surge staff even more. Quell speed instead becomes your dump stat, and I personally think 50 is enough. Alright, if you can get around 50 with the rest of this at 80, I would say you've got a god roll staff. Alright, that is it for the Surge staff, okay? And I hope you'll enjoy using it in the field. Now we're going to go through the Trauma staff. Now the Trauma staff is a bit of a weirdo, but it is a fun staff, okay? Why? Let me show you and explain to you why. The Trauma staff that I use, has no mandatory perks. To be fair, I rolled critical strike chance on it because I like it, but you can actually roll whatever damage type you want. I leave it up to you. I happen to roll Carapace Armored on it, so I never changed that. But I did put the ranged critical strike chance on it because I just felt it was somewhat useful. Alright? I didn't really have any other idea of what I wanted here. But the blessings on this are mandatory, so if you have to change anything, you must change the blessings. Warp Flurry and Rending Shockwave. Warp Flurry, you already know what it does. Rending Shockwave allows the target that you hit to receive up to 8 stacks of 5% brittleness. It scales with the charge of your secondary attack, so full charge, 8 stacks, yeah? And for some reason, although this lasts 5 seconds, it can stack twice, which is really wild. That means now, other people with the mod that shows the debuffs on enemies explained this to me, but... Oh, excuse me. Sorry, I've been filming for so long that I couldn't help but not hold that yawn back, but my apologies. Anyway, people with that mod have shown me or communicated to me rather that the brittleness of 5%, 8 stacks twice up to 16 stacks total, which means that you can actually get brittleness of 80%, not just 40% on your opponent. This is really, really good because brittleness acts the same as rending except that it benefits your whole team. It's a debuff on the enemy, reducing their armor by about 80%. That is a hell of a lot of good damage from whatever weapons you happen to be wielding, so don't hesitate to use Rending Shockwave. It is so good. Helps against bosses, helps against armored targets. It's just good, alright? Stat-wise, you're going to need damage as high as possible. You want your blast radius minimum is 70. All right, ideally get it as close to 80 as possible. Why? I'll explain in a little while. Charge rate as high as possible. Warp resistance, generally above 65 is good because this thing doesn't build up as much peril as the Surge Staff. But 65 is the minimum. Anything above 75 is really good. Quell speed is your dumb stat again. Why is blast radius important though? Well, blast radius is important with this particular staff because the staff works such that if this target is within the circle, even toward the edge of the circle, they take full damage. But if the target is on the edge of the circle, they don't take full damage. In fact, they take really minimal damage. All right? So you want to be aware of that when using this staff. The higher blast radius might only help it a little bit more, but that little dot, those few pixels make a difference, unfortunately, with the trauma staff. So you are going to have to take account of that. Last but not least with this build, what you have is the Voidstrike staff, and after thorough testing, what I have personally found works well for me. Okay, it may not work well for others, but as you can see, I tested a lot of different combinations, but what has worked best for me is this one. Okay, oops, sorry. Didn't mean to exit out of that. Let's go into it. For the Voidstrike staff, what has worked the best for me is a mandatory range critical strike chance. The other one can be whatever you want. I happen to roll Maniac, so I went with that. Warp Nexus and Warp Flurry are must-haves. You already know what they do. They've been explained twice. Alright, but they are both mandatory on the Voidstrike staff. Why? Because the Voidstrike staff is capable of headshotting, and if you critical while headshotting, you deal quite a bit of extra damage. So criticals are very necessary and are very important for this build. Without this, the Voidstrike staff becomes a lot weaker. Previously, the charge rate didn't even really matter that much because you could get a half charge with Surge Blessing and the Warp Nexus Blessing, and you would sometimes launch 2 orbs. It was so good, it was so strong, but that's before the nerf to the Voidstrike staff. Now with it nerfed, I find that Surge plus Warp Nexus and the slow charge speed just isn't doing it for me anymore. The Voidstrike staff is one of the longest charge speeds in the game, alright, because it's supposed to be a high-powered cannon. So Warp Flurry helps a lot with this, and it is just so good at what it does, okay? How good is it at what it does? Well, although it can no longer one-shot the Crushers, you know, with the Surge Blessing, a good full charge will help you throw your opponents off balance and dish out massive damage, especially if you go for the head. Alright? For Hordes, half charge is alright, and you will still squash most enemies. It really just depends on what you're willing to accept with this, but you will generally want to get the charge as high as possible and try to get a crit as well to really dish out the damage. It's no longer the supreme killer that it used to be, but it can still bring the pain, as you can see being demonstrated in front of you right now. With Warp Flurry increasing the charge speed, you can generally do quite well with this staff, generally, as long as you get close to a full charge, okay? But you do have to be very aware that you need close to a full charge to make that happen, and that is why I've chosen to go for Warp Flurry and Warp Nexus, okay? Previously, Surge was a good choice, but now I would not say that that is the truth any longer, okay? I found that I had a lot of problems with Surge instead. Now, in terms of the perk, if you're going to use it, You can refer to my perks staff video and look for the range weapon section to see what kind of stats, blessings are on it, because that hasn't changed. But I generally don't use the perk with this build because I find that it has way too much overlap with the Assail in terms of its function and job. So that's why I don't use it here. Yeah? Okay, let's talk about Curios. In terms of your Curios, the blessings that you want are +3 stamina, +17 toughness, and +21 max health. More or less, you're actually going to get 16 toughness, 20 max health, and 2 stamina. But try to get a 3 stamina if you can. It may take quite a few rolls, or it might take quite a few rewards for missions, but you'll eventually get some that are like this. Be sure to check Melk's store, alright, where he sometimes has the good stuff, or check the armory where they may sometimes sell the good stuff, okay? Or you can always like save up a ton of curios and just keep buying the mystery curio until they give you something decent. But in terms of your perks, right, they're standard across the board. 30 toughness regeneration and 20% gunner resistance is what I use across the board, alright? My last remaining perk, which I usually cannot re-roll, I try to make sure that it has combat ability regeneration, Or in this particular case, because you don't really use your combat ability all that much, you can go for your max health, max toughness. It's really up to you what you want. You can actually get up to 3 of them doing 4% max toughness, giving you an additional 12% toughness in place of combat regeneration, which basically acts like another mini toughness curio, which can be really good, all right? So don't knock it if you have something like that going on. It can be pretty awesome, especially because you don't use your combat ability all that much with this, okay? All right. Now that we've talked about that and talked about curios, I'm going to show you the playstyle with Assail because I think it's extremely important. I'm going to re-equip the Surge Staff and talk about Assail. Now, for this playstyle demonstration, what I want you guys to understand is that Assail has been changed since patch 13. Now, the primary fire is a bit weaker, all right? It does a bit less damage, and the secondary fire is much stronger. Assail has 2 firing modes. The primary fire, which has loose tracking, does about 200 damage, more if it's a weak spot, okay? And the secondary fire, which much stronger tracking and does much more damage, about 340, okay? How do you use Assail properly? Okay, there's gonna be a couple of different ranges that you guys are gonna have to take into account. The first and most important range is 0 to 15 meters. This is when a horde is charging in. Try to keep the dot trained close to their head and release a flurry of this Assail. Try not to spam it, just click slowly and you should be fine, okay? This is your methodology for dealing with hordes that are 0 to 15 meters in front of you. Okay, how far is 0 to 15 meters? Round about here, okay? From here to the Rager is 0 to 15 meters. This is where you want to cast your shards if you're dealing with a pure horde. Now, if it's a slightly mixed horde, like you've got some Ragers, some tougher enemies in between, up to from 0 to 25 meters, let's say there's some gunners also trapped in the back, what you want to do is you want to play it like this. 1, 2, long cast. 1, 2, long cast. 1, 2, long cast. The long cast will deal extra damage, upping your damage in general, and also sometimes hit the specials, which is very, very crucial to upping your damage and making sure that they don't butcher your team. This is more effective for mixed hordes, but if the mixed horde is within 0 to 15 meters, like they're really bearing down on you, don't feel ashamed to spam this because you will still dish out plenty of damage to them, as you can see right there, all right? So depending, like you got gunners in there, you can do something like this, like I showed you, you know, like that. Okay, 1, 2 cast, 1, 2 cast, 1, 2 long cast, 1, 2 long cast is a technique that you guys are gonna have to get used to. That's 0 to 25 meters. Now, if a target is up to 50 meters away, so from 15 to 20 meters, from 15 to 50 meters, right, which will be about here, kind of like that. Okay, I know that's 31, but it's a bit hard to get 50 meters in the meat grinder. You know, your technique for dealing with targets at a long distance is like this: secondary fire, hold it, right? Then dodge out, throw, dodge back in. 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 All right? Learn to peek your targets, especially if you are taking gunfire in a doorway or something like this. Find a covering spot and just do peek shots. Okay? This is what you do if your target is 15 to 50 meters away and shooting heavily at you. But be aware that the maximum limit for your Psyker shards is 50 meters. Okay? They're not going to track targets beyond that. So if your sniper is more than that, the only thing that's going to reach them is the Voidstrike staff. This is kind of the weakness and strength of all the different staffs. Assail is a great horde clear tool, but it is in general weaker than your staffs. So, when do you use Assail? When do you use your staff? Alright, before we go into the strengths and weaknesses of all that. Assail is generally used for horde clear, as well as when a mixed horde is coming in, that's when you want to use Assail. This is its greatest strength. If you see an armored target, what is armored targets? I'm talking about this here: Mauler, Crusher, and Bulwark. These 3 are armored targets. When armored targets come in, assume if they have hordes around them, throw your Assail at the hordes first and then immediately use your staff on the armored targets, okay? If the armored target is coming in with like 1 or 2 specialists or whatever, you can feel free to instead use your staff without switching to Assail, because you probably do much better, all right? This is the non-bugged Surge staff, in case you guys are wondering. All right, I'm not abusing the bug right here. This is how we play Assail in the current environment in patch 14. All right, Be aware of when to switch, be aware of what targets are bearing down on you and which weapon you should use for the situation. If the enemy is coming at you with a high value target like a specialist or an elite, use your staff more. If the enemy has a horde following it as well, use your assail to chop through the horde, chop through the mixed horde or whatever. Alright, and at range, at long range, use your assail shards to get the heads. Okay? That is the playstyle for Assail, which you guys will have to get very used to. It is no longer the universal killing tool, alright? But the buff to the long cast is so good for peak shots. Alright? It's so good for peak shots. And that about sums it up, alright? If you guys are interested in the combat demonstration where I demonstrated all of this live, check out my streams where I talk about the Assail Psyker. Check out the combat demonstration link, which is in the description of this video and also up above in a card. Okay, click on that card and it'll take you straight to the video. This will be on my sub channel. Alright, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you guys have had a good time. I know this video is a bit longer than the others, but it was crucial for me to explain all of this to you guys. Alright, I wanted you guys to know about all this. Oh, that's right, sorry. One last thing, alright? For those of you that watched up to this point, here's a quick little tidbit for you. In terms of strengths and weaknesses, I almost forgot to go through them. Three things. Trauma Staff is best close to mid-range and good for debuffing. The Surge Staff is best for close to mid-range, alright, up to 24 meters, and is good against anything because it doesn't require aiming. The Voidstrike staff requires aim, and you should treat it like a heavy weapon, but it can hit and target at any range, headshot and crit. So these are the strengths and weaknesses. The Voidstrike keeps you a bit focused on the front. I don't recommend using it if you're not sure if your team is going to help you out, because an enemy gets behind you, you're going to respond slower than with the other staffs, and you're probably going to get dead. Okay, so for those that watch this far, here's the little bit of secret knowledge for you. But again, most people would have seen this on my stream. Alright, thank you very much once again for watching. Alright, and now I'm going to thank all the people that make our videos possible. You ready? Let's go. Starting right at the top, we have October's Big Wig supporters, okay? They are the following individuals. RiverArcher124 is our top tipper, Bravo7910 and Vazgan are our top tippers as well. Top super chatter is Jason Kun. Top super chatter list goes Oracle Blade, Death Dawning 982, Dookie, Strix, HD Pork, Necron Sage, John Taylor, and Nightshade. Thank you to Nightshade for being our top channel membership gifter as well. I know you can hear my neighbor vacuuming. I'm so sorry about that. I hope the music helps to cover for it a little bit. And in terms of our top channel members who make all of this possible, here are the individuals that are at the top of the table. Right now we've got Big Chunkus at the only fan level. We've got Death Dawning 982 plus Ultra. We've got Yuri, Jason Kun, Jerry Fast, Rogue Assassin, Zach MG Prestige. Thank you guys so much. Thank you to all of our honored robots as well. Okay, thank you to the following individuals: Day, Atomica, Emix, Jordan Cost, Cordova, Yabs, Nightshade, Devin Lashin, Mookie Mocha, Rena, Chase Taylor, Nathan Strong, Lady Neo, Joey Danze, Sayed Assad, Coda CMF, Kamiya Samachin, Conrad C, and Benjamin Savage. Thank you to all of our cool and weird bots as well, and I hope you guys will have a great time with this build. Have fun and destroy your opponents in combat. I'll see you guys on the next one, okay? Oh, and turn your notifications on if you don't want to miss a video.